is It Starts with the Consumer, a Digital Journey. Please welcome Camila Casale, Chief Marketing Officer, Daniel Soto, VP Technology and Digital, Disney Signature Experiences, Disney, and Jorge Blanco, Chief Commercial Officer, Altus Group.
Buenas tardes a todos. Good afternoon, everyone. I am thrilled to be here today alongside these two amazing leaders. Digital is no longer the future, it's the now. Our panelists, Dan Soto and Jorge Blanco, are here today to discuss why staying ahead of the digital transformation is necessary within yourself as a leader, your team, and your organizations. Furthermore, they will shine light on how their organizations have digitally transformed and how they continue to digitize their companies in relation to the Metaverse, NFTs, and Web 3.0. Now a little bit more about our panelists before we kick off this panel. Gator alumni Daniel Soto has held a multitude of roles with the Walt Disney Organization, from project development manager back in 2007 to director of digital experience in 2015, and all the way to vice president of technology and digital for Disney Signature Experiences. Jorge Blanco has a wealth of experience in the tech industry. He has held management positions for AT&T, VP roles for Avaya and FICO, advisory positions for KPMG, and most recently, as February this year, Chief Commercial Officer and President for Altus Analytics. He joined Altus Analytics in March 2021 as EVP and Chief Product Officer. I'm going to go ahead and now kick off this panel. How have you in past roles digitized organization or left your mark during its digital transformation? Dan, let's start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. More than happy to. And thank you for giving us the time today to chat with the group. Super excited about this. And it's a great topic, digital transformation. This has been near and dear to our hearts at the Walt Disney Company for quite a bit of time. Our journey, at least on the theme park side of our division, which is sort of where I'm housed, started back in 2009. And the realization that if we wanted to continue to sort of grow our business, we needed to do something to appeal to the next generation of consumer. So for us, it really, it's typical digital transformation. And Jorge, you probably do a lot of the same type of stuff. You start with the consumer in mind. And we did a lot of research with our guests. And for us at the time, when we asked our guests, tell us a little bit about what the experience is to you. They'd reach into their pockets, and for those of you who've been to one of our parks, and they'd throw tickets on the desk. They'd throw fast pass tickets, photo pass cards, their wallets, and say, that's your experience. It's this sort of fragmented transactional experience. So that quickly set us on a multi-year journey to really figure out, how can we establish this digital layer on top of this physical immersive theme park environment that we have, and use that to create a seamless, frictionless experience for all of our guests. It wasn't technology for technology's sake. It was lead with the experience, and technology is truly an enabler. So some examples for us, we created effectively an operating system for our theme parks. That operating system, and for those of you who visited any of our parks over the past few years, you've seen our advent of our mobile apps. So things like the My Disney Experience mobile app that we now have in place. Any of you who have used this thing, it's called the Magicband. The Magicband was the outcome of that guest research and our realization that what if we had this one thing, this one medium, physical medium, that allowed our guests ubiquitous access into our theme parks to associate their photos, their fast passes, all of those things, and with a little bit of self-expression, as because we are the Disney company. So that combination of our mobile apps, the Magicband, really unlocked for us a whole suite of services that we could offer to our guests to make their experience more seamless and hassle-free. And that's been the journey that we've been on now over the last few years, is continuing to build on that operating system.
Thank you, Dan. Jorge, would you like to share your thoughts?
Sure. Well, first, it's really unfair to follow Dan because he works for the coolest company ever, and very, very jealous. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about my boring journey relative to digital. So I think actually Dan, he absolutely hit in the head in the fact that it cannot be about technology. And I think we'll probably get into that further in the panel. But for me, the entire journey actually started with the more fundamental elements of digitization, which were voice and video. And I think it's important for the audience to understand, because I'm an old guy with about 33 years of experience. But in the early 1990s, straight out of college, we were already installing desktop video systems using digital technology to begin to play around on how people would connect. And the process of really digitizing that type of what I would call innate human and consumer type of interaction was core to what we did. Nowadays, we talk about actually outsourcing and insourcing and contact centers and service delivery. Well, 20 years ago, people had to put their contact centers in very physical locations with physical wires that connected those. And the entire revolution of being able to provide service delivery relied on the digitization, primarily of voice and chat, for example, and really coming together with the web for companies to literally put their employees anywhere. I remember most likely in the late 90s, there was a new airline. I'm not authorized to say who they are. You could probably triangulate, but there was a new airline in the market that decided to get a competitive edge through service delivery. The only way they could do it, because they were based in the Northeast, was to actually begin to hire agents, much like what we've experienced in the pandemic, in their homes. So they did a profile and they found highly educated populations in other parts of the United States primarily, and they connected them virtually from their homes. This was the beginning of the 2000s. This was not yesterday, which it feels like it was. So that's really where my journey began, was really digitizing the hard stuff. And like Dan said, everything has continued to evolve into the transformation of the enterprise itself. But it is not a new topic. It's, I think, something that maybe has gotten many names, but we've been working on for decades at this point.
Very true. So it's not secret that the pandemic changed the world we live in, and it was what accelerated the consumer adoption of digital technologies. Can you walk us through how your organization responded and adapted to this digital acceleration, and how you managed to leverage digital to get out of the pandemic? Jorge, let's start with you first.
Yeah, I think, look, the tools themselves are pretty obvious. I mean, I think we all, for some reason, discovered technology that had been sitting around for a very, very long time and many people didn't use. I think if there are any KPMG colleagues in the audience, I'm a very proud alum, but I would say, while we had video capabilities to collaborate in the firm, it was really not used the way that we use it just 2.5 years after this thing has started. So that was the first area, was really creating collaboration platforms and then begin to rethink the file systems and structures, if you will, in terms of the processing of and workflow of information that needed to be rethought. An interesting thing happened to us, just to give you a sense of how difficult the pandemic could get. In mid-June, I believe, of this past year, we were hit by a cyber attack that actually almost put us out of commission for about 6 weeks. So we had already taken the steps of the pandemic and then had to double down on a digital enterprise to make sure that the employees could connect, files could be delivered, bills and clients could be invoiced, and that we could continue to govern. We're a public company, more importantly, close the books at the end of a quarter. So all of those things basically have alerted us. I mean, I would say if you use a DEFCON type of model, right, we really moved up the needle to a high level of urgency to transform digitally, not only the processes, but also the backup and continuity services that need to be delivered to get that up and going. So we had a near, I would say, a burning bush type of experience with a cyber attack on top of the pandemic. All of it was put to the test. And fortunately, we came out the other end.
Thank you, Jorge. Dan?
Yeah, and Jorge, that's you bring up an important topic because we're grappling with it even today. Cybersecurity. When you talk about the level of like digital acceleration, but along with digital acceleration comes digital adoption. And we are seeing incredible levels of digital adoption of a lot of the tools that we have in the sort of Disney parks ecosystem. But with that comes the increased threats of cybersecurity issues, vulnerabilities. So it's put a ton of at least pressure on us on the Disney side, and it sounds like in your space as well to stay focused on that. For going back to the question around the pandemic, no business was probably impacted as substantially as our Disney parks business. I mean, you're used to Disney World and all of our businesses being open 365 days of the year at all times. So the thought that we could actually shutter our theme parks for extended periods of time, especially given the huge volumes of cast members, employees that we employ, was a very difficult thing for the company. And as we sort of sat back and thought about how we reopen these businesses, it really became a conversation around what we believe to be a new normal that was emerging out of the pandemic, and a new normal where things like social distancing, desire for folks to have sort of self-service access to transactional things was just going to become part of the normal sort of environment. Things like we are doing right now, engaging virtually with one another versus a physical in the room one-to-one interaction. So for us, it became an exercise in figuring out what are the technologies that we can put into place to address those new normals, but do so in a way that doesn't create a lot of throwaway work. Let's not develop something that's going to be sort of a fleeting thing that you only leverage for 3-6 months, whatever, and then you move on to the next thing. So we tried to truly treat it as an acceleration of our roadmap versus a fork in the road. So some examples of some things that we put into place: mobile order. So the ability when you're in one of our theme parks to go up to a quick service restaurant through our mobile app, order your quick service meal, and so that when you arrive at the restaurant, you just have to go to a certain area and your food is ready, you pick it up and go. This is actually an example of a capability that we had available before the pandemic, but when we had it before the pandemic, we were maybe getting called 10 to 15% penetration of that service or usage of the service. The second that we now instituted social distancing, we changed our business process, because that's part of digital transformation as well. So you can deliver the tech, but you need the cultural change that goes along with that to drive the true behavioral shift. Once we started literally creating some locations that were mobile order only, in other areas we literally started removing some terminals and creating more lanes for mobile order returns, our penetration jumped to like 75-80%, and to this day we're still operating at levels that high. It's pretty incredible. And then other examples, I work for the Disney Cruise Line. The Disney Cruise Line, we quickly digitized the entire experience: online check-in, passport upload, even uploading your selfie, because as you need that on cruise ships, all available through your mobile device. Things like everyone who's been on a cruise, you know your favorite thing that you do on the first day of the cruise, it's that muster drill where you put on your life preserver and you stand in a room with 1 million people. We completely digitized that. Now through the mobile app, we give you point-to-point directions to your muster station. We use things like image recognition to basically prove that you are at your muster location, and then we deliver the safety video to you through the comfort of your own mobile device at your leisure. Those are like the types of things that are sort of game changers for us. Virtualizing guest services through chat. So many sort of tools at our digital disposal now these days that when applied to the right use cases can create a pretty seamless and hassle-free experience for our guests. So that's where we have been over the past, I'd say a year, 2 years as we reopen our businesses, leveraging those types of technologies.
Thank you, Dan. That sounds super cool. So now as we look ahead to the future, there's a lot of hype when we talk about the digital future and trends. Can you both speak on your plans, ambition, on what new technology spaces you're exploring, for example, the Metaverse, NFTs, Web 3.0, how you're handling and preparing on the cybersecurity side of the business, and what the digital future looks like for your organization?
Yeah, I can start on that if you like. There's a lot there. And we are focused on a lot of things, but I'm actually going to start in a very boring place. Privacy and trust. So when you start talking about like the future of technology, a lot of these advanced technologies, whether they be things like natural language processing, AI, and those types of things, facial recognition is one that we're very focused on as a seamless way to authenticate into experiences. They all come with a level of privacy. And even in the legislative environment that we're in right now, where it's very decentralized, you're seeing it all over the place, individual states coming up with their own legislation related to technologies like facial recognition and biometrics and things of that nature. It's a complex landscape that we're sort of operating in. But that said, ton of cool stuff that we're looking at. I mean, the buzzword, and Jorge, you guys are probably going through similar stuff with the Metaverse. The term the Metaverse is often used these days, means different things to different individuals. For us at Disney, it truly is about how do you build this bridge between the digital and the physical. The good news for us within Disney is we've already got access to this incredibly immersive physical environments that no one else can create. So our task is sort of cut in half. Our task really becomes, how do you create that digital layer that amplifies that physical experience? We've done a couple things recently that are pretty cool in this space. Some of you may have seen the Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser. It's the Star Wars Hotel. A totally immersive experience where you can engage with your favorite, Star Wars characters in an immersive story. It's a 2-day adventure, fully immersive. But now we've leveraged what we call the Play Disney Parks app to really create the thread of stories that different guests may be engaging in different aspects of the experience. Some may skew more towards the First Order, some may skew more towards the Resistance, but all of it is based off of intelligence that we're engaging with through the mobile app. On the cruise line side, we're about to launch something that we call Disney Uncharted Adventure. So imagine being able to create your own personal avatar for you and your family. The avatar comes with you on your Disney Cruise Line vacation. As you are navigating our ship, we're leveraging long-range technologies to be able to identify when you may be at a cool sort of interactive location. And now all of a sudden that display that one moment was just the movie times for our theater now becomes a gaming screen where you're using your smartphone to keep your head up, but you're controlling now what's going on the screen. Your avatar is there with you, and based on how you perform, your avatar can earn accessories and those types of things that we hope will then carry back into your other experiences that you may have in our theme parks and other parts of the Disney sort of ecosystem. So Metaverse for us is a really big deal, and probably where we're spending a good chunk of our time these days.
Thank you, Dan. Jorge?
Well, a lot more boring than Dan, again, which, I'm fascinated and I cannot wait to visit and have the 2-day experience at some point. There's a couple of areas that we're looking at. We are primarily focused in the commercial real estate market. So it gets very, very real. In our business, we talk about real assets because they are, as real as they get, concrete and steel. And even within that, there are a couple of areas that are of high interest relative to the technology. The Metaverse, like everything else that I said, has been evolving for quite some time. There's probably people in the audience that had homes on Second Life probably in the mid-2000s, and we were trying to figure out, how this was going to come into the enterprise. However, I think our theme is very similar to a certain extent to what Dan was discussing, but it's really around leveraging technologies of the metaverse for augmentation of real assets, which is that connected type of experience where today, for example, we have done, we put a significant amount of investment into the ability to discover new markets through analytics for our clients to be able to really pinpoint from areas and investment strategies all the way down to a physical location, which technologies like the metaverse, but really at the end of the day, combinations of augmented reality or AR can actually begin to create an experience that allows you to have a much more informed decision by the time that you're done. With that, we're also quite intrigued by blockchain. I mean, blockchain we've been talking about for quite some time, and obviously NFTs are connected to that. But blockchain in itself is definitely one of those technologies that does promise to begin to solve the high integrity exchange of information and documents and artifacts that are very critical in document intensive type of industries like ours. So that's another area that we're heavily looking at. Web 3.0 is definitely there, but we spend most of our time really in the application element, which is how are you going to connect the dots between these experiences, the data that we've got, the analytics that we're running, and allow the client to essentially shorten time to decision, which, in many cases, I could apply it to the consumer experience because that's exactly what you're trying to do, and obviously add much more context to the experience as you go. So we're looking at, really metaverse and augmented reality. We're looking at areas like blockchain more specifically. And in some cases, it'll be Web 2, Web 3 in terms of how it's presented to clients. But that's primarily where we're spending our time at the moment.
Connecting the dots is the hardest part. We all want to get to sort of the cool sort of the end experience. But even like for us having multiple businesses with all unique technology to identify the individual identity. So even just arriving at common identity, common things like payment preferences, there's so many different elements of underlying elements of the metaverse from an architecture perspective that you need to get organized on. Almost at this point in parallel to developing all the cool experiences that take advantage of that. So that's a little bit, when you said connection, that one triggered it for me because that's where we're having to spend a lot of energy right now. We all want to get to the cool experiences, but there's some foundational work that has to happen to pull this off.
I would agree.
That's so very true. So now I'm going to open up for some Q&A to the rest of the high-tech familia. Feel free to provide questions in the chat of this live session for either Dan, Jorge, or even myself. In the meantime, let's break the ice for this Q&A session with the first question from myself to both of you. Why do you think some companies struggle with digital transformation? Jorge, I don't know if you would like to go ahead first.
Sure. I would say that actually, from what I've seen, the biggest struggle that I've actually experienced it is Dan mentioned the relevance of processes. Processes are typically artifacts of the moment in time that they were put in place, not necessarily intended to run forever. And I think people are trying to recreate themselves in some cases digitally without looking at themselves and going, we may look like a very different animal by the time that we are done transforming. So I think that is essentially when you actually hear about transformation disasters, right? People that have been spending millions of dollars, and you never get to the end. And when you get to the end, somebody goes, well, okay, that was a good idea, but we're going to do it again. These are efforts that really have not taken that, what I would call an out-of-body experience and said, who are we trying to be? And then how does digital transformation enable me to get there? So I think that's the biggest area. When that doesn't happen, and a plug for firms like mine, my years at KPMG, that really spent a lot of time thinking about, well, hold on, why are you doing this? And then working themselves backwards into that effort. So I think that's the biggest mistake, Connie. I mean, it's the fact that this is not about reinventing or redoing what you've done in a digital fashion. It's about truly transforming yourself. And I think a lot of people miss that in the journey.
So true. That's exactly it. The other one I would throw out in a similar vein is, and I'll start with an example. Like when we first developed, I remember the very first deck that we created, the pitch deck for all these things like I'm talking, like Magicbands and all that. I remember the last page of that deck. It basically was a statement to our senior executives, and it said, all the things that we just showed you on this previous page are doable. It's just time and money. It's technology. The most important question for us is culturally, is this company prepared to make the leap that you're making when you digitally transform yourself? The technology eventually will work after a lot of testing, but it's got to be in the hearts and minds. You've got to win that, and for us, we're Disney. We're known for our world-class guest service. This is not about technology as eliminating, positions and those types of things. It's truly about technology to augment the level of service that you can provide to our guests. So for us, once we had like the technology at a point to where it was, passable from a functional perspective, we had to engage a lot of our cast. Literally, we would do, you can have a test day, a 2-night test day at one of our hotels, but we want you to use the technology and we want you to tell us what went well, what did not go well, what can we improve. And that was all part of the journey to win the hearts and minds of the folks that we're going to rely on to administer, sort of a lot of this digital technology. It has to come from both ends. So it's business process and just culturally, are folks ready for what comes with this all?
Thank you, Dan. We do have a question from the audience. I'm going to go ahead and read it. Do you believe that the world governments need to be united with a framework to support privacy and the individual protection against ID theft, basically creating a trust for the individuals around?
Boy, that's a tough. I'm not a politician, so I'm not gonna step into that world. What I will say is at least for us, as we think about how we engage in a lot of these emerging technologies, like I mentioned, with facial recognition, with natural language processing, if we can at least establish some common guideposts that we all can sort of subscribe to. I'll give some examples. For us, you always give the consumer the choice on whether they want to engage or not engage in the experience that is created by this technology, this digital technology. In the case for us, where we deal with children a lot, so parental consent. If you are going to engage with a child for the purpose of delivering an experience, make sure that there are processes for parental consent. Data scrubbing, policies and those types of things. As long as we have a solid understanding of what those commonalities are across all of legislation, I care less about a centralized sort of approach to it. But that's the way we sort of go at things from a Disney perspective.
Now, I would say, obviously, there is an obvious answer that having much more standardization, cooperation, and I would say sorry for throwing a big technology or technologist type word, but harmonization of guideposts, as Dan said, would be ideal. I think the early more aggressive examples of privacy acts out there, like the GDPR in the European Union, and now even the CCPA in California, do create some challenges from a delivery perspective when people are not beginning to create common frameworks. I think there are some countries in the world, and this is, I'm not a politician either, nor do I want to be clear. But I think you look at countries like China, for example, they've shown that within their country, they have very aggressively set norms and standards of communication. You can go in any way of the fence in terms of how they're handling it, but the standards do enable very large economic activity. So it would be ideal if we could transcend borders in a very connected world. I'm not sure the politicians are the ones that are more equipped to stay ahead of the game. I actually, as a citizen, I hope they are going to be, but I don't have high hope. So
let's hope so. So we're getting a lot of questions now. I'm going to go ahead and read the second one. This is actually a very good one. How has your customer experience response been positive, negative when comparing from the traditional in-person experience to now a digital experience where you might not have that quick and to the point in-person interaction?
Yeah, it's I'm not going to say it's better or worse. I'm going to say it's different, and I say different because the expectations of, well, let me say it this way, availability of our systems has always been super important to us, but now in a world where maybe the only way that you can engage to accomplish XYZ task is done through a digital means, not a physical one-to-one means you need to be at 100% availability at all times, and there's very little grace given to you from the consumer. So that has been one of the eye-opening things for us. In the Disney Cruise Line side, we have 100% penetration of our mobile app, and I'm not rounding, 100%. So it is central now to the experience, and that, for the technology side of us, it puts a lot of pressure on making sure that we're doing whatever we can to make sure our systems are resilient and stable for the consumer. It's just a different dimension to sort of the question.
And I would just add that, it's not difficult for us to basically make the generalization that we've become massively intolerant of any blips in technology. And actually, as Dan was talking about earlier, we tell our folks, it's not that the technology is disappearing. Actually, the technology is becoming so pervasive that you've got to increase the sophistication by an order of magnitude. What that means is that, went back to the question of really what has changed and what has been the outcome, the obvious ones. When you are not obsessively looking at what the experience will be of the end user and doing the things that Dan is suggesting, you are going to fail, and you are going to fail biblically. I mean, it's going to be enormous and very publicly. So ultimately, you have to become much more cognizant of what are all the different points of failure, and you actually then need to have a pulse and close feedback loops with your clients that become highly dependent on this, because we are massively intolerant. I mean, I'll just give you the example. I don't know if any of you, I'm sure you all travel, you've all connected on Wi-Fi on airlines, and they're trying to do a better job. They get better every year, but it's still an underwhelming experience. And we get upset that at 35,000 feet, we can't stream our videos yet, right? So ultimately, that level of intolerance is there, mostly because you've got digital natives and millennials as well that are a critical community. I don't say it as criticism. They don't know anything different. So why would they expect anything different? So I think that is, and kudos to Disney, very, very big fan, because it's one of those key examples of companies that really are obsessively looking at every angle. Because of the nature of the business, we all need to be doing that.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you, Jorge. We're getting a lot of great questions. I don't know if we're going to have time to answer all of them. Do you have examples of bottom-up and top-down digital transformational initiatives when each approach is better to bring expertise disruption?
Well, what I would tell you is that I have not seen a transformation yet that doesn't require 1,000% buy-in from senior leadership. I think Dan mentioned something to this before, because there is a cultural element to it. With that said, once that occurs, I mean, I would say in our world, we have seen, quite a few examples of grassroots efforts where just in the context of simplification and discovery of potential, points of simplification, the bottom-up approach has been quite successful. But it's like a sandwich. It's got to meet in the middle. I've never seen it personally. Maybe Dan has examples where, they never meet and you still get the result. It's got to meet in the middle between the top and the bottom. Otherwise, you end up in meandering in the desert a little bit. Dan, I don't know if you've got any.
I agree.
I haven't seen them.
Totally agree. And, from a bottom-up perspective, the way we think about that is develop proof of concepts. So can you fake a front end to a UX and have a lot of the automation really manual on the back end to sort of prove out is the consumer receptive to the digital experience that you're putting before them? Is it driving the level of value that you expected to drive out of it? Then, to your point, Jorge, you got to go back to the top and say, okay, we've proved it. This is it. There's something here and it's working for the consumer. Now let's go, productize this for real. But you're right. You got to have both. It's hard to do 100% bottom up.
Yeah.
Thank you. Next question. Digital transformations are typically disruptive. Can you talk a little about how you influence other leaders to enable your organization to take the leap? What strategies worked and what would you refine if you had to do it again?
I tell you one thing that I don't have all the answers on this one because Lord knows we tried a lot of things, but the one thing we did try to do is make it real for senior leaders within our organization. So what we did is when we had the vision of what we wanted our transformation to be, we literally took a warehouse, a soundstage at one of our theme parks, and we invested some time, resources to create a demo, a walkthrough experience that says, okay, imagine a world where the next time you book your Walt Disney World vacation, this is what it looks like. How does that feel to you? Now imagine if you received, one of these things in the mail, 30 days before you left on your vacation, and it could do XYZ thing. Truly sort of visualize for folks what this could be and what the value that could be generated from it. It makes it real for people versus just being sort of deckware or words on a page with some numbers attached to it. So that we're a storytelling company, so we find that the storytelling element is the big aspect of getting the right buy-in from senior leaders.
And what I would say is, you've got the masters of experience with Dan and his company. So I'm going to take a slightly different complementary angle just on the management front, given the question. Change isn't for everybody. So what I would tell you from a management standpoint is, I come from a school that says every soldier has only one right, and that is the right to competent command. So what that means is senior leadership needs to set a clear strategy that the middle management and bottom up is well understood and people can opt in or opt out. When you're going to do this type of transformation, you're not going to be able to get everybody across. Everybody deserves the respect to understand what are you trying to accomplish, what is the strategy of the company, how are you moving, and why transformation is going to be an ingredient in achieving it, and then give them an option. And make it safe to opt in and make it safe to opt out from a management standpoint. I see things that perhaps I've learned by mistakes is sometimes we want to give people the benefit of the doubt and give people the benefit of the doubt again and the doubt again. And the benefit of transformation continues to be kicked down the road because we go, well, you know what? It's not going to change anyway. Unfortunately, the benefit starts to die. The promise of the benefit of transformation starts to die the minute you decide to go do it. So you got to move quick. And that's what I would say is one of the biggest lessons that I've had is once you explain it and you believe you've explained it enough and you have enough buy-in to go, yeah, enough people get this, you then need to make it safe for people that may never be able to support you as you're going and give them an opportunity to go do something else.
Thank you, Jorge. Next question. Do you all find that Latino consumers are early adopters of digital innovations?
What do you think, Jorge? I hope we are.
I would say this Latino consumer spends more money on technology than I don't know who, much to my family's dismay, but I think we are. I actually have found that there are places, and in my belief is underutilized pockets of high technology capability throughout the entire continent that I have found phenomenal engineers in Brazil, phenomenal engineers and developers in places like Argentina, Chile, Mexico. And if I'm not mentioning your country, it's only because we are finding them everywhere. So I do think that there is an early adoption. I think perhaps some of our cultural complements probably, keep us a little bit farther apart. But when I've seen it come together, I think Latinos are in an excellent position to take full advantage of technology, and they have done it. And I think you're going to find us. That's why you find us in a lot of corners of technology as high tech has uncovered, because, we love this stuff. So, yeah, I think we're in.
Even when I was looking at the sponsors for high tech, there's a lot of incredible companies there that are close partners to us, that are, from Hispanic countries all over the world. One different twist to the question, as we design products, there's a huge focus that we're putting right now behind building inclusive products. You want to build a digital product that appeals to Black and African American consumers, Hispanic consumers, differently abled consumers. So for us, there's been a huge push to not only drive better representation across the teams that are actually building these products, because if you have a very sort of diverse and representative team with many different voices, which is going to come out on the other end of it is a highly inclusive product, and that's going to appeal to the broad, population of folks that are going to be using it. So we're focused on things like that, but we also recognize that while it takes some time to get the level of representation that we need from our Hispanic community and others on our actual product teams, we need to put in some what I call Band-Aid solutions in the interim. We've established inclusive product councils where we go to many of our diversity resource groups. So we have within Disney a community called OLA. We also have a community called Latinx in Technology. And we'll go directly to those communities and say, here's the concept, here's what we're thinking about doing, here's what the big idea is, what's your feedback? So we can at least make sure that we're doing our best to build a product that's going to be universally accepted and adopted by many different dimensions of diversity. It's a big deal these days.
Thank you, Dan. This is going to be the last one as we're running out of time. This is a pretty long question. When we think about user experience, most of the time we think on end users consuming a service, like user making a reservation or buying a product. But there are other user types that are part of this digital journey, like suppliers, consultants, technicians, joint ventures, distributors, internal users. Each of them have a different life cycle and access management requirements. What is that fundamental work you're recommending the companies to evaluate first?
It's a great question. That's a great question because we run into what's good and what's bad, especially in the execution of that question, which is, if you only focus on one element of the user experience and do not understand, as Dan was saying, not only the persona, but the journey, what's going to connect, and the many tentacles of that experience, at some point you are going to dissatisfy that client. And in many cases, you could potentially do it by causing damage, right? So the way that the foundation that we've put in place specifically is we have essentially upgraded what really is the product management discipline. So the people that land on the capability of delivering these services to a client, we don't even call them product managers. We call them offer managers deliberately, by the way, simply because we don't want anybody to think that you did a very nice digital front end to something and you're done. Because you have to think, how is the service going to be delivered? How is it activated? What happens when the service ends? How do you renew that service? What happens when you take a support call? What type of information needs to be collected for that support call to be effective? How much intelligence can I extract from the experience so I can put it in front of professionals that can assist me? That requires a massive amount of cross-functional collaboration that needs to land into people that understand what's going to happen. I am certain that Dan has many experiences because this is the way Disney, at least as a Disney consumer, it appears to me that they're looking at it from multiple angles. But certainly in a B2B space like mine, it is equally important to ensure that all of those components are put in. And it may be different personas like suppliers, different distributors that are coming in that could, as I said, could have catastrophic impact on an experience inadvertently if you're not essentially putting functions in place and people's jobs in place that are looking at that proactively all the time. It doesn't stop either. There is no end in this. It's an infinity type of race.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the very tip of the value chain may be the customer where you're ultimately getting revenue. But if you keep chasing that value chain up, it's all connected. Vendors, suppliers, for us, our cast members that have to deliver the service. The answer to the question from our side is you run them at the same time. At the same time that we have teams that are developing sort of what's the next great digital product experience for a guest, we have dedicated studios and teams, product managers that are thinking about that same product from the lens of the cast members that need to deliver that experience. And it tests our mettle because when you know how things are, you have budgets. And when you get the value engineering starting to work through the budgets, the first team that often gets pressed is the team that's providing the services for the cast members to service the guests. So it forces us to be very disciplined on making sure that you think about it from both ends. But yeah, it has to happen. It's part and parcel to delivering the experience. If you don't have again, it gets back to the hearts and minds, but hearts and minds only get you so far. You need to have the technology that supports the folks that are part of your value chain.
Thank you guys. I do have one last question since we have 5 minutes left. What is one big real life lesson learned throughout this accelerated digital journey?
There's a lot of real life. The one that just comes to me is in the world of digital transformation. If you ask the consumer what to build, all you're going to get is a marginal improvement on what they get today. Because we as consumers, whatever we're doing, whatever we're using, that we only know what we use. So I'm always about, you talk to the customer, you talk to the consumer about what their needs are. What are the things that you would like to have? Not tactically. What are the emotions you'd like to have? What are the gaps that you are seeing in the product or experience that you're having today? Then let us go solve and imagine, what the tomorrow is going to be. Don't ask the consumer for what the tomorrow needs to be.
And I think for me, probably along the same line, I would say the most difficult skill for folks in our industry and ourselves to learn is really the dissection of value. We think it's easy. It really isn't. I mean, there is a lot of sausage making when you want to understand how do you actually create value for a customer, an end user, all of the above. That in itself requires a lot of thinking. It requires innovation. And like Dan said, in some cases, there are a lot of people that will go back and just ask end users. You are going to get what we call rear view mirror answers. They're going to tell you what they needed yesterday. So that means you need to be really good about asking, not just about the needs as Dan is saying, but then ask again, and then ask again, and look at the compliments. So from my perspective, what I really have learned and then try to impart in the people that I work with is do not absolutely underestimate the amount of neurons that you gotta put behind the real articulation of what is a value formula. And if you do that, you're not gonna get it, perfect is the enemy of good. We're not asking for perfection, but you're gonna get close, and then you can go perfect the next time. So that to me has been something that I probably obviated in the early part of my career. It's like, it's value, it's technology. Who would not want to use it? Well, you really need to consider the question of value very, very methodically, is what I would say.
Thank you, Jorge. And officially, we have run out of time. Thank you, Jorge and Dan, for providing such an insightful discussion. And yeah, thank you everyone for listening to this panel.
Thank you very much, and thank you for moderating.
Thank you.